It's a hard knock life for us. It's a hard knock life for us. Instead of treated, we get tricked. Instead of kisses, we get kicked. It's the hard knock life. Being poor in America isn't fun, that's for sure. With people all around us humble bragging on Facebook and the negative stigma that comes with taking a handout, not having a lot of money is the pits. If you look at average incomes per resident per country, Americans are 6th wealthiest. Switzerland is Mr. Moneybags around these parts. The poorest place on earth? Believe it or not, there's 5 countries in Africa where folks make less than $1,000 a year. Still feel poor now, mister? Here in the US, the average poverty rate for a state is 13%, down a full 1% since the Trump administration began. Most of us are fairly comfortable, I'd say. However, today, we're going to look at the poorest states in America, put some perspective on income levels, and try to understand why they're poor. Then we'll give many of them a little motivation and help them feel a little bit better about their situation. And all of this for free. Thanks, YouTube. Hooking up poor people across America who can't afford cable. Does anyone actually still watch cable anymore? So try to follow along through your cracked screens as we pour through America's poorest states. Our first stop along our poor pilgrimage across the U.S. starts in North Carolina. What? That's where I live. I'm certainly not poor, though. I make like $1 jillion every month entertaining y'all. Here in my home state, the poverty rate is a full 16%, which is 3% higher than the national average. Folks bring in about $50,000 annually, good for the 8th lowest amount in the U.S. For perspective, people in the richest state, Maryland, earn about $25,000 more each year than in North Carolina. Now, I live here, and I know where the rich and poor pockets are located. Much of the wealth is in the Charlotte area, in the Raleigh-Durham-Chapel Hill region, called the Triangle, and along the coast. There's large areas in the Tar Heel State where folks are down on their luck. Calling many of them rednecks wouldn't be a stretch. North Carolina's a purple state, pretty much a 50-50 split between those with good jobs and those with lousy ones, or no jobs at all. Things are looking up here, though. North Carolina is the nation's 10th fastest growing state. Many wealthier families are moving here because of the large number of technology and healthcare jobs sprouting up. So I can imagine this state won't be on this list much longer. Now, times are tough and we're not able to drive, so we're going to take the bus to our next poorest state in America, Georgia. Does your bank account look like this? Does your car look like this? If so, you might live in Georgia. Here in the Peach State, 17% of residents live in poverty, and families earn about $52,000 a year. That's the husband and wife combined. Not a lot of wiggle room each month, fella. Most of the poor problems are in pockets like Savannah, Macon, and Atlanta, where there are a ton of people who not only don't have jobs, they get welfare too. Now, to be fair, Atlanta is really booming when it comes to job growth and innovation, and the growth seems to be outpacing the chronically poor population. But us people in Georgia will tell you, Georgia's 2 states, Atlanta and everywhere else. And everywhere else is struggling. It's expensive to be poor in Georgia. More than half of Georgia's poor households spend more than half of their income on rent and childcare. And Georgia's nearly at the bottom when it comes to number of residents with health insurance. There is hope, Georgian. The state has added more than 60,000 jobs in the last year, and the unemployment rate continues to head down. That's great. Let's continue to look on the bright side, poor Georgia guy. What did Charlie Bucket do when he was faced with a lifetime of being penniless? He stuffed his face with chocolate and won the lottery.
Did you know Georgia ranks 5th in America for lottery spending?
Wow, you're right, Mappy. Look at the map I just found. There's a few states on our list today that spend a lot on lottery tickets. Now, while it might be easy to judge and say maybe Georgia guys should stop throwing his money away on gambling, I guess you can't blame people for playing the lottery here. For many of them, it's the only real shot they have at a comfortable life. We have to borrow a friend's car to get to our next poorest state in America, Arkansas. I'll bet he won't mind if we bring the car back on empty. Here in Arkansas, a lot of bank accounts are empty. The natural state has an 18% poverty rate, and families bring in about $43,000 a year. Now, here in Arkansas, small paychecks can be stretched a lot further than they can in other states, but it's still tough times here. Arkansas used to pretty much be the poorest place in the country, but they're not as poor as before, though. Back in the 1940s, nearly half of all Arkies lived in poverty. So that's good. Economically, slowly, things are improving here. Of course, not everyone grows up poor here. The Clintons are from Arkansas, and they're certainly not broke. They made $153 million in speaking fees? What the frick? Sam Walton's also totally loaded. He's the founder of Walmart, and he's from Arkansas. Here's your typical Arkansas Walmart today, where many poor people shop. There's nothing wrong with shopping at Walmart. I go there too, but only because they have cheap t-shirts. Don't worry, Arkansas guy. Cinderella was broke as all get out until she found her way out of the poorhouse. Poor, poor, pitiful me. The bus was late, so we got here after midnight, damn it. We've arrived in South Carolina, the 7th poorest state in America. We're gonna grab something off the dollar menu, because that's all we can afford tonight. South Carolina peeps are straight struggling. They have a poverty rate of 17%. Households bring in less than $50,000 annually, and 90% of working adults here live paycheck to paycheck. In America, 75% of full-time workers live paycheck to paycheck. That's a real big difference. Many of the problems in South Carolina stem from a lack of good genes. No, that's mean. The real issue here in South Carolina is complex. For instance, rural South Carolina communities that rely heavily on agriculture are so broke that locals have dubbed the area the corridor of shame. As we'll see as we continue to move through this list, there's a lot of theories as to why the South is so poor, but many economists agree that going back to the Civil War days, the northern states invested in infrastructure and technology, while the South remained committed to farming. As a result, education fell behind, as did the Southern economy. Now, if you ask people in places like South Carolina if they think they're poor, many will likely tell you no. On paper, they don't have a lot, but a simple life with God, friends, and family nearby is all they need. We begin to make our way north one more time on our strapped stroll of America, where we take a quick stop in the pretty state of Kentucky. Kentucky residents earn the 5th lowest salaries in the nation at $46K a year, and 1 in 5 Kentucky peeps lives in poverty. If there's a bright side here, at least the unemployment rate is about average. Just about every state has its haves and have-nots. Here in Kentucky, the bluegrass area that consists of Louisville, Lexington, and Cincinnati suburbs are all doing just fine. Several large companies make their headquarters here, but the rest of Kentucky's pretty broke. The coal mines of eastern and western Kentucky are in decline, as is the tobacco industry. The small towns outside of Kentucky's urban areas are fading from importance, and 2 in 3 people in Kentucky lives in these boonies. There's ways you can get out of the poorhouse, Kentucky guy. People make like $50 a week giving blood, but you have to donate good blood. And I don't know if there's more meth or Mountain Dew running through a Kentucky man's veins.
Yahoo! Mountain Dew! Yahoo! Mountain Dew! It'll tickle your innards.
If you're living in Section 8 or Section 4, keep your head up, Kentucky. After all, this guy was poor and he ended up saving a whole kingdom. And he was broke as hell, but wound up being a star on a kids' television show. Yeah, I'm proud to be a coal miner's daughter. As we begin to tire of riding the bus around all the damn time, we come to our next poorest state, West Virginia, which is right next door to Kentucky. The poverty rate is 18% in West Virginia, and families bring in about $44K a year, both very low numbers. However, a couple bright spots keep West Virginians from ranking even poorer. The unemployment rate isn't so bad here, so that's good. And the cost of living is so low here that low salaries mean more families can get by and remain out of poverty. However, when Walmart is your state's biggest employer, that's indicative of a struggling worker base. West Virginia is in a tough spot. It's a beautiful state, but all those rolling hills means it's hard to build big cities and industry. And prescription meds and booze have taken a toll on a large part of the population. West Virginia ranks first in the nation for overdoses. Migration studies have shown that 60% more people moved out of West Virginia than moved in. And West Virginia is the only state where death rates exceed birth rates. But hey, West Virginia, do you have a roof over your head and a car that runs? Running water? Then you're not that poor. Sure, I know you want a new car and to own your own home, but you know what? More bills means more stress. It's like the more money we come across, the more problems we see. We're heading back down to the south, where we'll remain for most of the rest of our unwealthy excursion. The next stop takes us to Louisiana. Too bad we don't have enough money to buy booze. They look like they're having so much fun. Here, more than 19% of residents live in poverty, and families command a yearly paycheck of around $46,000. That's not enough for many people here to climb the success ladder. Other stats that are eye-opening? Louisiana is last in the nation for income gap by gender. Louisianans are third worst for food insecurity and third worst for education. The last stat proves it's tough to entice job growth since the state here doesn't have the educated population to support it. Corporate subsidies aren't helping things in Louisiana either. Look at this graph that depicts how much taxpayer money goes from public to private coffers in the Pelican State. Louisiana's abundant natural resources are a blessing and a curse. While the state enjoys the windfalls that come with oil and natural gas extraction, a lot of people here have become dependent on the energy sector for a paycheck, and it won't last forever. There's a sense of fatalism in Louisiana too. Poor people just remain poor here. It is what it is, they say. All we can do is pray, they say. There's little urgency here to seek change. Now, even though you're poor in Louisiana, there's still plenty to do on a budget though. Actually, no, all these things kind of suck. Being broke means you can't do fun stuff. Never mind. We scrounged up enough change to get us to our next poorest state, Alabama. Lots of people in Alabama are bro to the oak. Families here bring in about $46,000 as a household annually, earning about $1,000 less than the average American each month. And about 1 in 5 residents lives in poverty here. Why is Alabama so poor? Like other states we talked about so far, one side will say unregulated capitalism has created severe poverty here. Other sides will say Alabamans aren't working hard enough and can control their own financial fate. We're not going to take sides on this, but the poverty is alarming nonetheless. In many Alabama counties, it looks third world, where poverty rates reach 40%. Many of the poorest counties are also the fattest counties in the state, proof that cheap food is bad for us. You know who isn't poor in Alabama? Their head coach. He made like $11 million last year, more than any other public figure in the state. I guess you get what you pay for. Alabama's been winning national titles left and right lately. Our next poorest state is all the way across the country in New Mexico. We can't afford that trip, so we're going to just research New Mexico from home. In New Mexico, 20% of residents live in poverty, and families bring in about $46,000 a year. That's about $10,000 less than the national average. 1 in 3 kids lives in poverty here, which is a big reason New Mexico ranked last in the nation for places to raise a family. Native American reservations and illegal immigrants pad the poverty numbers here too. When you look at the nation's most federally dependent states, New Mexico's at the top. That means New Mexico can't collect enough from income taxes and has to rely on federal subsidies to help pay for schools, roads, healthcare, and welfare programs. Apparently, things are getting worse in New Mexico, not better. More young working-age adults are leaving the state than coming into it, which means more and more federal assistance will be needed down the road. There's hope, though. It's not like there aren't success stories coming out of New Mexico. Microsoft was founded in Albuquerque, and Jeff Bezos grew up in Albuquerque. This guy took matters into his own hands, too. He began a successful business from scratch out of his New Mexico garage, too. We've come to the end of the line where we get off this stinky bus for good. We're in Mississippi, the nation's poorest state. In Mississippi, 22% of people live in poverty, meaning nearly 1 in 4 families earns about $25,000 annually. That's the same poverty rate as the African nation of Namibia. That's poor. Factors that contribute to the very poor atmosphere here are a 5% unemployment rate, and up until a couple years ago, 1 in 4 Mississippians wasn't finishing high school. Hard to get ahead when you don't study, pal. When you Google Mississippi, the first auto-suggest is, why is Mississippi so poor? So, why is Mississippi so poor? For many of the reasons we've already talked about before. It's just worse here than anywhere else. Poor education and limited job opportunities are a big factor. High incarceration rates and a history of racial segregation has held back a large percentage of the population too. For many Mississippians, it's a generational problem. And for quite a few of them, a government safety net of welfare and unemployment makes being poor a lifetime goal. Ultimately, it comes down to a desire to succeed. There are limitless opportunities here in Mississippi, as there are in other states we talked about. Being poor is not a life sentence. While these states have large populations that have been poor for ages, it doesn't have to be so. If you're poor in America, there's heartwarming rags to riches stories all over the place that you can use as inspiration. Slumdog Millionaire, Pretty Woman, heck, even Annie. Most people are probably not going to get adopted by somebody, but I'd be willing to bet that if many of America's poorest just changed their mindset, their situation would follow suit. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I love you. Tomorrow, you're only a day away. Subscribe to my videos. Hey guys, if you learned something new or you just like this video, make sure to like it. And if you really like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all of our videos about what it's like to live in different places in America. Peace.